Imagine living in a home where fear lurks behind every corner. That was the life of Lily, a young woman full of hope, until she married into a family that would turn her dreams into a nightmare. Lily's new husband, Michael, seemed like the perfect partner. But there was one problem: he couldn't fix his mother, Margaret. Margaret didn't welcome Lily as most mothers would. Instead, she saw her as an outsider, someone who threatened her close relationship with her son. Small arguments quickly grew into bitter disputes. Margaret's resentment toward Lily only intensified, filling the family home with tension and fear. She would often make snide remarks, undermining Lily at every turn. But no one expected the darkness that would soon unfold. One evening, after yet another heated argument, things went too far. Neighbors would later remember hearing shouting coming from the house. But when the shouting stopped, a chilling silence filled the air. Inside, Lily lay still. Her life had been violently cut short, leaving everyone in shock and horror. When police arrived, they found Margaret's story didn't quite add up. She claimed Lily had been the aggressor, but the scene told a different tale. Evidence pointed to something far more disturbing: a crime that was not just a spur-of-the-moment fight, but perhaps a planned act driven by jealousy and anger. This story explores the deadly path of a family torn apart, where love turned to hatred and rivalry turned fatal. Join us as we uncover the chilling details of Lily's tragic end and the events that led her mother-in-law, Margaret, down a path of no return. Lily had always dreamed of a loving family. Growing up, she pictured a life filled with warmth, where everyone looked out for each other. When she met Michael, she thought she'd finally found the person who could bring those dreams to life. Michael was kind, understanding, and had a gentle nature that made her feel safe. They spent countless hours planning their future, and Lily was certain that marriage would bring them happiness. But there was one part of Michael's life she hadn't fully grasped: his mother, Margaret. Margaret was the type of person who needed control. She had raised Michael mostly on her own after his father left, and over the years their bond became unusually close. Margaret felt that no one could care for Michael like she did, and she made sure he understood that. When Michael brought Lily home for the first time, Margaret's reaction was cold. She barely spoke to Lily and spent the evening keeping Michael's attention on her. But Lily brushed it off, thinking Margaret just needed time to get used to her. She believed that, eventually, they could have a friendly relationship. As the wedding date got closer, the tension between Lily and Margaret grew. Margaret would make snide comments about Lily's choices, from the wedding arrangements to the dress. She'd criticized Lily's family and even suggested that Michael deserved someone better. Michael tried to calm things down, telling Lily that his mother was just protective. But Margaret's behavior was starting to make Lily uncomfortable. On their wedding day, Margaret barely smiled, and her words to Lily were short and dismissive. That moment left Lily with an unsettling feeling, a sign that the marriage would come with difficult challenges. After the wedding, Michael and Lily moved into a small apartment nearby. It was their first home together, and Lily was excited to make it their own. But Margaret visited often, sometimes unannounced. She would bring over food and helpful suggestions, though it felt more like she was inspecting Lily's home than helping. She'd comment on how things were arranged, often insisting that her way was better. Lily tried to be polite, hoping to avoid conflict. Michael, on the other hand, seemed blind to his mother's interference. He grew up with her ways and saw her as a caring, if slightly overbearing, parent. Months went by, and Margaret's behavior became harder to ignore. She would make sudden visits whenever Michael was at work, often staying for hours. She'd tell Lily that Michael was under her care for years, and that she knew him best. At first, Lily tried to stand her ground gently, telling Margaret that she and Michael had their own way of doing things. But Margaret would respond with a dismissive laugh or a quick remark about how young people didn't understand real family bonds. The words stung, but Lily held back, not wanting to escalate the tension. One day, things took a darker turn. Lily had planned a special dinner for Michael's birthday, hoping to celebrate quietly at home. She spent hours cooking his favorite dishes, setting the table with care. But just before Michael arrived, Margaret showed up. She walked into the apartment without knocking, carrying a large homemade cake. Without acknowledging Lily's efforts, she set the cake on the table and began arranging things her way. Lily felt her frustration boiling over, but before she could say anything, Michael walked in and greeted his mother warmly. Margaret beamed, ignoring Lily entirely. That evening, as they sat down for dinner, Margaret dominated the conversation. She reminisced about Michael's childhood, talking as if Lily wasn't even there. When Lily tried to join the discussion, Margaret would change the topic or make comments that dismissed Lily's experiences. By the end of the night, Lily felt invisible, as if her role in Michael's life didn't matter. After Margaret left, she tried to express her feelings to Michael, but he brushed it off, saying his mother just needed to feel included. As more time passed, Margaret's presence became overwhelming. She'd call Michael multiple times a day, often expecting him to drop whatever he was doing to help her. Lily found it difficult to connect with her husband without Margaret's shadow looming over them. Whenever they made plans, Margaret would somehow find a way to insert herself. Even on weekends, she'd insist on family gatherings that left Lily feeling out of place. One evening, Margaret showed up unannounced again, but this time her demeanor was colder than ever. She accused Lily of turning Michael against her, of keeping him away from his true family. Lily tried to reason with her, explaining that she and Michael needed their own space, but Margaret wouldn't hear it. She told Lily that no one would ever come between her and her son, that Lily was just an outsider who didn't belong. Lily began feeling trapped. Her relationship with Michael was suffering, and she felt like Margaret's presence was consuming their lives. Michael seemed torn, caught between his wife and his mother. He didn't want to hurt either of them, but his loyalty to Margaret made it difficult for him to see the full impact of her behavior on Lily. The once happy and hopeful atmosphere of their home became tense, filled with unspoken frustrations and unresolved conflicts. Despite her attempts to make peace, Lily felt like Margaret's anger was growing. She sensed that Margaret's resentment toward her was more than just protective jealousy. There was a deep, unsettling bitterness in her eyes whenever they crossed paths. Lily found herself looking over her shoulder, wondering if Margaret's anger would ever fade. Margaret's visits continued, each one more uncomfortable than the last. Every time she arrived, there was a tension that filled the room. She would make herself at home, treating the apartment as if it were her own, rearranging items, commenting on Lily's cooking, and subtly undermining her at every opportunity. Lily's attempts to set boundaries were ignored, and Margaret would often show up even when Michael was not home. It felt like Margaret wanted to remind Lily, who held the real control. One day, Margaret arrived with a gift for Michael. It was a small photo album filled with pictures from his childhood. She handed it to him with a warm smile, recalling memories and recounting stories from years past. Michael flipped through the pages, laughing and reminiscing, while Lily watched from the side. Margaret's eyes would dart toward Lily from time to time, as if to gauge her reaction, but Lily stayed quiet, feeling like an outsider in her own home. The album seemed innocent, but it only added to the growing wedge between Michael and Lily. The strain began affecting Lily's relationship with Michael. She tried to explain her feelings to him, telling him how Margaret's constant presence made her feel uncomfortable. Michael listened but seemed torn, caught between his loyalty to his mother and his commitment to his wife. He would assure Lily that things would improve, that Margaret was just adjusting to having someone else in his life, but these words offered little comfort. Margaret's actions showed no signs of change, and Lily felt more isolated than ever. As the months passed, Margaret's resentment grew stronger. She often hinted that Lily wasn't a good match for Michael, that she wasn't capable of understanding or caring for him the way a mother would. She would bring up little things, like how Lily didn't know Michael's favorite foods or didn't understand his habits. Each comment was subtle but hurtful, chipping away at Lily's confidence and making her question her place in Michael's life. Margaret seemed determined to create a rift, to prove that no one could replace her role in Michael's world. One afternoon, Margaret took it a step further. She arrived unannounced, once again, while Michael was at work. She sat down with Lily in the kitchen and began listing her complaints. She told Lily that Michael was changing, that he wasn't as close to his family as he used to be, and that Lily was responsible for this drift. Margaret accused her of tearing the family apart, making it clear that she blamed Lily for everything wrong in Michael's life. Lily, taken aback by Margaret's words, tried to defend herself, saying she only wanted to build a happy life with Michael. But Margaret dismissed her, saying that a happy life was impossible with someone as selfish as Lily. The confrontation left Lily shaken. She had never been spoken to with such coldness, and it made her realize just how deep Margaret's resentment ran. Margaret's words haunted her, filling her with doubt and sadness. She felt trapped, unsure how to move forward or find a way to make peace. The constant tension was wearing her down, affecting her well-being and her relationship with Michael. She began to withdraw, avoiding conflict and trying to keep things calm, hoping that eventually Margaret would tire of her bitterness and allow them to live in peace. But Margaret wasn't finished. In her eyes, Lily was an intruder, someone who had come between her and her son, and she would not let that go. She began showing up even more frequently, using every opportunity to criticize and undermine Lily. She would make snide remarks about Lily's appearance, her background, and her family. She would subtly hint that Michael deserved better, planting seeds of doubt in both Michael and Lily's minds. Every visit felt like an invasion, a reminder that Margaret would not allow Lily to take her place. The tension eventually boiled over one evening. Margaret arrived unexpectedly once again, finding Michael and Lily sitting down for dinner. She immediately took over the conversation, as she always did, steering it toward memories from Michael's childhood and their close relationship. She brought up how she had raised Michael alone, how she had been there for him through everything, and how family was the most important thing in life. Her words were laced with bitterness, aimed at Lily without being direct. Lily had reached her breaking point. She calmly but firmly asked Margaret to respect their home and their space. She explained that while she understood Margaret's bond with Michael, she also needed room to build her own life with him. Margaret's expression changed, a flicker of anger crossing her face. She stared at Lily, a look filled with resentment, and replied with a quiet but intense tone, saying that Lily would never understand the connection she and Michael shared. She suggested that Lily was nothing more than a temporary presence, someone who didn't belong. Michael, caught in the middle, tried to calm them down, but it was clear that things had reached a point of no return. Margaret stood up, her voice sharp as she declared that she would never accept this marriage, that Lily was not, and would never be, part of her family. She stormed out, leaving Michael and Lily in stunned silence, the tension thick in the air. After that night, Margaret's visits stopped. Days passed without any word from her, and although the silence brought relief, it also left a sense of unease. Michael was distant, struggling with the fallout from the confrontation, and Lily felt the weight of the strained relationship. She wondered if Margaret was simply taking time to cool off, or if something darker was brewing in her mind. The peace felt fragile, as if it could shatter at any moment, leaving them both to wonder what might happen next. As the days passed, Lily sensed a quiet tension settling over her home. Michael seemed withdrawn, weighed down by the recent confrontation with his mother. He would spend long hours in silence, as if lost in thought, and often excused himself to make phone calls, claiming he needed to check on Margaret. Although Margaret had stopped her unannounced visits, her presence lingered like a shadow. It was clear that she was not ready to accept Lily, and this absence only heightened Lily's unease. She found herself wondering if Margaret was planning something or simply waiting for the right moment to reappear. One evening, Michael returned home looking more tense than usual. He mentioned that his mother had called, and her tone was calm yet unsettling. She had expressed regret for the argument and even offered to have a family dinner to clear the air. Michael was hopeful that this might be the first step toward peace, but Lily remained hesitant. Her past encounters with Margaret had left a mark, and she felt that this invitation could be a ploy to regain control over their lives. Still, wanting to support her husband, she agreed to attend the dinner. They set a date for the following weekend. The day of the dinner arrived, and an uneasy feeling settled over Lily. She dressed carefully, trying to remain optimistic but still wary of Margaret's intentions. Michael was eager, hoping that this dinner would mark a fresh start. As they arrived at Margaret's home, the atmosphere felt cold and unfamiliar. Margaret greeted them with a tight smile, her expression revealing nothing of the bitterness that had marked their previous encounters. She led them to the dining room, where a carefully set table awaited them. The setting was formal, almost rigid, as if every detail had been planned to perfection. Dinner began with polite conversation, mostly between Margaret and Michael. She spoke warmly to him, asking about his work, his health, and even his hobbies. It was as if Lily didn't exist in her world, her presence acknowledged only with brief glances. Margaret's attention was solely focused on Michael, reminding him of the close bond they once shared. Lily felt like an outsider in the room, a feeling that was both familiar and uncomfortable. As the evening went on, Margaret's demeanor shifted subtly. Her polite words began to carry an edge, her questions more probing. She asked Lily about her plans with Michael, subtly suggesting that Lily was pulling him away from his family. Michael tried to steer the conversation toward lighter topics, but Margaret's persistence made it clear that she was not ready to let go. She began recounting stories from Michael's childhood, emphasizing how much she had done for him, the sacrifices she had made. Her words, though gentle, were a reminder of her role in Michael's life, a role she wasn't willing to relinquish. Lily felt the tension building in her chest. She wanted to leave, to escape the weight of Margaret's words, but she remained seated, trying to keep the peace. She could feel Margaret's gaze on her, sharp and cold, as if challenging her to respond. Michael, sensing the discomfort, suggested they end the dinner early, but Margaret insisted they stay for dessert. She brought out a tray of tea and cake, her expression calm and controlled, yet there was an unsettling look in her eyes. As they sipped tea, Margaret began speaking more openly, her words dripping with resentment. She claimed that Lily had come between her and Michael, tearing apart their close-knit family. She accused Lily of taking her son away, filling his head with thoughts of independence. Her voice grew louder, the polite facade crumbling as her true feelings surfaced. Michael tried to calm her down, but she dismissed him, her focus solely on Lily. The evening ended on a tense note. Lily and Michael left quickly, both shaken by the intensity of Margaret's words. As they drove home, silence filled the car, each of them lost in their thoughts. Michael seemed torn, caught between his love for his mother and his commitment to his wife. Lily, on the other hand, felt a growing sense of fear. Margaret's words had revealed a depth of resentment she hadn't fully understood, a bitterness that felt like a looming threat. She couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end, that Margaret's anger had only been reignited. In the days that followed, Margaret's calls to Michael increased. She would call at odd hours, sometimes late at night, her tone shifting from pleading to accusatory. She would ask Michael if he remembered their family traditions, if he missed the way things used to be. She would hint that Lily was changing him, making him forget his roots, his family values. Michael tried to reassure her, but Margaret's words left a mark, filling him with doubt and confusion. Lily began to feel the strain on her marriage. Michael became distant, his mind clouded with his mother's influence. He would often bring up things Margaret had said, questioning their decisions, their future. Lily could see the toll it was taking on him, the way Margaret's words had woven their way into his thoughts. She tried to reach out to him, to remind him of their shared goals, but it felt like a battle she couldn't win. As time went on, Margaret's bitterness only grew stronger. She began sending letters to Michael, each one filled with accusations against Lily, blaming her for every change in their relationship. She would remind him of their bond, of the life they had before Lily entered the picture. These letters became a constant reminder of Margaret's presence, a reminder that she would not let go easily. Lily found herself trapped in a cycle of fear and helplessness. She could feel Margaret's resentment growing, like a storm building in the distance. Every call, every letter, every word was a reminder that Margaret saw her as an enemy, someone who had come between her and her son. Lily wondered how far Margaret would go, how deep her anger ran, and if there was any escape from the hold Margaret had on their lives. As weeks went by, the strain from Margaret's interference continued to haunt Lily. The phone calls and letters from Margaret to Michael never stopped. Each letter contained new accusations, each call brought fresh doubts, and every encounter left an invisible scar on their marriage. Michael became more withdrawn, as if he were slowly being pulled into Margaret's influence. The man Lily had married, the man who once promised a future filled with love and warmth, seemed to be slipping away. Lily's attempts to reach out to him felt pointless, her words brushed aside by the grip Margaret held over him. It was like watching the life they'd built together crumble, piece by piece. One evening, Lily overheard Michael on the phone with his mother. His voice was quiet, almost defeated, as he listened to her lengthy complaints. Margaret's words filled the line, poisoning his thoughts with tales of how Lily was taking him away, changing him, making him forget his family. Lily could only stand there, feeling helpless, as Michael's expression turned colder. That night, the silence between them was louder than any argument they had ever had. There was a distance that seemed too wide to cross, a wall built from Margaret's constant manipulation and Michael's growing confusion. The pressure weighed heavily on Lily's mind, affecting her health, her sleep, and her peace of mind. She began to feel paranoid, sensing Margaret's presence in every corner of her life. She would check the locks twice, peer through the windows, and walk around with a feeling of unease. Even when Margaret wasn't physically present, it was as if her influence lingered, filling Lily's thoughts with dread. Margaret had turned her own home into a place where she could no longer feel safe, and that fear was slowly taking over her life. One night, Lily received an unexpected phone call. She recognized the voice on the other end. It was Margaret, her tone unusually calm. Margaret invited her over, saying she wanted to talk, to clear the air between them once and for all. Her words seemed sincere, almost apologetic, but Lily felt a pang of suspicion. Margaret had never shown any interest in resolving their issues before, and this sudden change felt strange. Despite her doubts, Lily agreed. She hoped that perhaps this was a genuine attempt to make peace, to finally put an end to the tension that had been tearing their lives apart. The following day, Lily prepared herself for the meeting. She dressed simply, trying to calm the nervousness that twisted her stomach. As she made her way to Margaret's house, a wave of unease washed over her. The streets felt quiet, the air heavy, as if something dark was looming just beyond her sight. She tried to shake off the feeling, telling herself that this was her chance to finally resolve things. She wanted to believe that Margaret's intentions were genuine, that this meeting would bring closure, and that she could finally move forward with her life. When Lily arrived at Margaret's home, the door was already slightly ajar. She stepped inside, calling out softly, but there was no response. The silence felt unnatural, as if the house itself held its breath. She moved further in, her footsteps echoing in the empty rooms. The house was dimly lit, the shadows stretching across the walls, creating a sense of isolation. Lily's heart raced as she looked around, feeling the weight of the silence pressing down on her. She could feel that something was wrong, but her hope for resolution pushed her forward. In the dining room, she finally found Margaret standing by the table, her face hidden in shadow. Margaret greeted her with a distant look, her expression unreadable. She gestured for Lily to sit, and without a word poured them both a cup of tea. Lily watched her carefully, trying to gauge her intentions, but Margaret remained quiet, her eyes cold and unblinking. The tension in the room was thick, filling every corner, making it hard for Lily to breathe. She felt trapped, unsure of how to break the silence, waiting for Margaret to make the first move. As they sat in silence, Margaret's gaze grew sharper, her calm demeanor giving way to something darker. She began to speak, her words slow and deliberate, each one laced with bitterness. She told Lily that she had ruined everything, that she had taken Michael away, that she had torn apart the family Margaret had worked so hard to build. Her voice grew louder, her hands trembling as she gripped the edge of the table. The calmness that had marked her invitation was gone, replaced by a simmering rage that filled the room. Lily tried to respond, to reason with her, but Margaret's anger was unstoppable. She rose from her chair, her movements deliberate, as if controlled by a force beyond her. Lily felt a wave of fear, realizing that Margaret's resentment had reached a dangerous level. She wanted to leave, to escape, but the intensity of Margaret's gaze held her in place. Margaret stepped closer, her voice filled with venom, blaming Lily for every perceived slight, every change in Michael, every imagined loss in her life. The confrontation spiraled, words turning to accusations, and accusations turning to threats. Margaret's anger, which had simmered beneath the surface for so long, finally erupted. The bitterness, the jealousy, the possessiveness, all of it came pouring out, filling the room with a sense of impending danger. Lily's heart raced as she tried to diffuse the situation, but it was clear that Margaret's mind was set. The line between reason and rage had been crossed, and there was no turning back. In that moment, Lily realized the full extent of Margaret's hatred. She had underestimated the darkness that had been festering in Margaret's heart, a darkness that now threatened to consume her. As the walls seemed to close in, Lily's only thought was escape, but Margaret's presence loomed over her, trapping her in a situation she had never anticipated. Lily's heart raced as Margaret's anger grew fiercer, her words cutting deeper, fueled by years of resentment. The calm, controlled woman who had invited her over was gone, replaced by someone filled with a dark and unsettling rage. Lily felt trapped, knowing that she had underestimated Margaret's bitterness. She sensed that leaving the house would not be as simple as she had thought, but her instincts urged her to try. She stood up slowly, hoping to create some distance, but Margaret's intense gaze followed her every move, her eyes filled with a cold determination. Suddenly, Margaret reached for something nearby, a heavy object Lily hadn't noticed until now. Margaret's grip on it was firm, her hand steady, as she stepped closer to Lily. Fear surged through Lily, but her feet felt frozen in place. The once quiet room seemed to close in around her, the silence now thick and suffocating. Margaret's face held an expression that was almost void of emotion, her focus solely on Lily, as if every ounce of her frustration had found a purpose in this single moment. Lily tried to reason with her, speaking softly in hopes of calming her down. But Margaret's mind was fixed, her resolve unshakable. She moved with an unsettling calm, her steps deliberate, each one bringing her closer to Lily. In a last attempt, Lily turned to run, her heart pounding as she moved toward the hallway. The room felt longer, the distance greater than it had been before, as if every step took twice the effort. Behind her, Margaret's footsteps echoed, steady and unhurried, each one reminding Lily of the danger closing in. As Lily reached the doorway, Margaret's grip tightened on the object in her hand, her steps quickening. Lily felt a sudden, sharp impact on her back, a force that sent her stumbling forward. Pain spread through her body as she struggled to regain her balance, her vision blurring. She could feel herself weakening, her surroundings fading as Margaret's anger took its final form. Lily's breaths grew shallow, each one harder to take as her body succumbed to the injuries she could no longer ignore. The house fell silent once again, the tension dissipating as Margaret stood over Lily's still form. The bitterness, the resentment, the years of holding on to her son, they had all led to this moment. For Margaret, it was an end she had come to accept, a conclusion to the constant battle she believed Lily had brought into her life. The quiet now was different, a heavy and unsettling silence that hung in the air, marking the end of what had once been a family conflict that spiraled beyond control. Hours passed before anyone noticed that something was wrong. Michael, who had been out for the day, came home to find his mother's house eerily quiet. The front door was slightly ajar, a sight that immediately set off alarms in his mind. He stepped inside, calling out for his mother and Lily, but there was no response. The silence felt heavy, oppressive, as if the walls themselves were hiding something. As Michael moved further into the house, he saw the signs of a struggle: the overturned chair, the broken glass, the traces of a confrontation that spoke of a violence he had never imagined. His heart raced as he followed the trail to the room where Lily lay, her body still and lifeless. The reality of the scene hit him like a wave, his mind struggling to process the sight before him. He fell to his knees, grief and shock overwhelming him as he reached out, hoping against hope that she would somehow respond. Michael's cries echoed through the house, the sound carrying out into the quiet neighborhood. Neighbors soon gathered, their faces filled with shock and confusion as they realized the gravity of the situation. The police were called, and the once peaceful home became a scene of flashing lights, whispered conversations, and quiet gasps as the details of the crime emerged. As investigators moved through the house, piecing together the events of that tragic day, it became clear that Margaret's jealousy and possessiveness had reached a breaking point. They found the letter she had written to Michael, each one laced with accusations against Lily, each one a testament to the depth of her bitterness. The officers could see the pattern, the gradual buildup of resentment that had led to the violent end. Margaret's neighbors, who had always seen her as a devoted mother, were shocked to learn of the darkness that had consumed her. Michael, broken and grieving, struggled to make sense of what had happened. The woman he loved, the life they had planned together, had been taken from him in the most brutal way. His own mother, the person he had trusted and cared for, had become the one to shatter his world. The weight of the betrayal was heavy, leaving him with a deep sadness that would linger for the rest of his life. In the days that followed, the quiet neighborhood mourned the loss of a life cut short by the twisted grip of jealousy and possessiveness. Friends and family gathered, remembering Lily's warmth, her kindness, the dreams she had held for the future. They struggled to understand how something so dark could grow in a place meant to be filled with love and family bonds. The tragedy left a mark, a reminder of the dangers that can arise when resentment festers unchecked. As time moved forward, the story of Margaret's actions remained etched in the memories of those who knew her. Michael, haunted by the events, tried to rebuild his life, but the loss of Lily and the betrayal by his mother would forever shape his path. The echoes of that day served as a somber reminder of how jealousy, left to grow unchecked, could twist love into something unrecognizable, leading to a loss that no one could ever truly understand.